Hi, Kathy Durden here. I want to talk to you about color. When people talk about color, frequently they talk about warm and cool colors, and I found that my students find this very confusing. So I'm going to change up a little bit about how we think about color and talk about it as having the absence or presence of the number of primaries. Now we know that the primaries, back from elementary school, are yellow, red, and blue. But it's very difficult to find a pure yellow without any other primaries in it, a pure red, or a pure blue. And as you see here, we have Hansa yellow, which is a very bright yellowy yellow, but it might have a tinge of blue in it. It's tending that way. And here we have New Gamboge. Well, you can see New Gamboge is very different from Hansa Light. It's got some red, it's going towards orange, so it has the presence of another primary. It has the presence of red in it. And then down here with red, well, this is Scarlet Lake, and this is Permanent Rose. And you can see, probably if you just looked at Scarlet Lake, you would think, oh, that's red. But when you see it against Permanent Rose, you can see the presence of another primary. You can see that it's got a little bit of yellow in it. It tends towards orange. And Scarlet Lake is very similar to Cad Red. I don't happen to paint with the cadmiums. I don't like their opacity. I like to paint very transparent. So I use Cad Red, or rather I use Scarlet Lake or Quin Coral for that tone when I'm looking for it. And as you look at Permanent Rose, well, you can see the blue in there. You can see that there's no yellow in there, but there's a lot of blue. And then going over here to our blues, we have cobalt here, and we have cerulean. And you can see that cerulean has a lot of yellow in it, which we don't see in our cobalt. Now, why does this matter? Well, it matters when we're mixing colors, because we think, oh geez, I'm going to get an orange, so I could get a good orange by picking a yellow and a red. But depending upon the yellow and red you pick, you're going to get a very bright orange or a very dull brownish orange, because you're bringing in the presence of the third primary. What you want to try and do when you're mixing, if you want a very vibrant color in the secondary colors, you want to mix in a way that you don't bring in the third primary, versus if you want to get a dull brownish or darker color, then you bring in the third primary. And let me illustrate this with both on the orange side and, more importantly, on the green side, because I think we all get hung up on mixing green. So I'm going to demonstrate this briefly on the orange side, but more on the green side. So let's go and show you the difference between mixing Hansa Light right here. So I'm taking my Hansa Light, and let's mix this with Permanent Rose. And then I'm going to contrast that. So that's Hansa Light, Permanent Rose. Let me just show my Hansa Light and show my Permanent Rose. Okay. Now at the same time, let's do our Hansa Deep or New Gamboge and Scarlet Lake together, and see the difference in the vibrancy of the color. See that? This is very brown and dull. Get a little bit more Hansa in there. It's very brown. This is very bright. Now where we're really gonna see that is over here with our yellows and greens, because we think, oh geez, I wanna try and get a green. And a lot of us do mix our greens because we don't like tube greens. They don't look like colors found in nature. But if you want to get a really vibrant green, you're not going to get it by mixing cobalt and new gamboge. That's just not going to do it. You're going to get it by, because you're bringing in the third primary, you're bringing in the red. Versus here, if we just mix a cerulean with a Hansel light, you're going to get a very, very, very vibrant green. So let me illustrate. So there's our Hansel light again. And let me bring in cerulean. You can see that it's a nice, vibrant green. Now let me go the other way and mix new gamboge with cobalt. So here's my cobalt. There's a little bit of yellow on my brush, so let's try that again. There's my cobalt. Get a little bit more cobalt out, and I'll get my new gamboge. And you can see now, very olive, very, very, very different. Very brownish olive, because you brought in the third primary. And even doing cerulean with new gamboge. There's my cerulean and new gamboge. You're still bringing in that third primary, and you're getting a very brown, olivey color. So, and this is really important if you're trying to mix greens, and most of us do try and mix greens. You can get really vibrant greens. Here's a really good vibrant green by using Hansel light or bismuth and manganese. And this is just a wonderful spring green. Isn't that pretty? Such a pretty spring green. That again was manganese. Here's my manganese. And my Hansel light. I can do that. I can use my Hansel light, and I like to use Hansel light or Aurelian a lot in mixing greens because I can get some really exciting and great variations in my greens. So let me just do Hansel light, and here's Prussian. And you can see you can get a nice, good mid-range green there. It's Prussian. And it's a light. Now, if I want to go, and sometimes you want to get a browner or a olive or green. So you could go to something like a Prussian and a raw sienna. Bit more raw sienna, and you can see how you can get a nice foresty green, which you may want that green. So there's a lot of variation in green you can get, and it all comes from mixing, from knowing your colors. And so I've done a chart here to show, and I used Hansel light, Aurelian, new gamboge, and raw sienna, and to show how I first did a layer of the yellow down, and then I put over it the blue, and you can see how vibrant my manganese is versus my cobalt. And I'll just put it up again. So there's my Hansel light, and there's cobalt. A little bit more cobalt up there. It's fairly dull. Versus doing Hansel light and cerulean, where we have a nice bright green. And contrast that with, now we can do with Aurelian here. So if we do Aurelian and cobalt and sort of dull. It looks like it's got another, it's going toward brown. It looks like we're brought in the third primary versus, here we go with Aurelian. There's a little bit of orange in my Aurelian, so it's not quite clear. And with some manganese. And we have that beautiful bright green. And let's show New Gamboge up here with cobalt. Very olive looking. Because we brought in all three primaries, so it's going towards brown, it's going towards gray. And same thing here with manganese. Same idea. Manganese, because it's got so much yellow in it, is brightening it up some, and it's not as dull as my cobalt mixture, but still it's not the vibrant green that you get with mixing Hansel Light or even Aurelian. And then if I go to raw sienna and I do my raw sienna right here with cobalt, and it really just goes to a very olive drab grayed color because we brought in all three primaries versus going here with manganese, where it's a little bit going to be a little bit brighter because the manganese again has more yellow in it. It's still very olive drab compared to if I'm using Hansel Light or Aurelian. So look at your colors before you mix them together and try and think about what primaries are in them. If you were to mix that color, what primaries have you brought in? Do you have red in there? Is there blue in that red? Is there yellow in that red? Is there yellow in the green, in the blue, or is there red in the blue? And know that before you put them together, because you may not anticipate it until you put them together and you realize that you've got colors that you don't want. And this also applies for when you're painting on paper and you put two colors next to each other and you're thinking they could blend beautifully, and in fact they blend and create mud. So if you're wanting to try and avoid mud, avoid bringing in the three primaries. Thank you very much.